The first red flag appeared during a routine audit. I was reviewing the quarterly reports for Montgomery Industries, where I worked as the head of internal auditing, when I noticed something strange. The international shipping records didn't match up. A set of containers leaving our Portland facility didn't line up with any incoming inventory. My name is Diana Wells, and after 15 years in corporate accounting, I thought I'd seen it all. But this was different. The numbers weren't just wrong, they were intentionally misleading. That evening, I stayed late at work, digging deeper into the records when my husband James called. "Don't wait up," he said, his voice sounding distant. "Late meeting with Emma about the Johnson account." Emma was his new secretary, minus 26 years old, fresh out of business school, and according to James, completely dedicated to her job. I gave a vague reply and hung up, turning back to my spreadsheets. Lately, numbers felt more reliable than my marriage. The shipping discrepancies led me down a rabbit hole. Each container had proper documentation, but the contents never arrived anywhere. It was like the shipments existed only on paper. I kept digging and almost missed the next red flag: a series of wire transfers to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. The amounts were small, just under $50,000, and sent like clockwork every third Tuesday of the month. The pattern was too deliberate to ignore. "Mrs. Wells," my assistant Michael interrupted my thoughts. "Sorry to bother you, but Mr. Montgomery is asking about the Key 3 audit. He says he needs it by tomorrow." Robert Montgomery, the company's CEO and grandson of the founder, was known for his impatience and love of luxury. "Tell him it's almost ready," I said, even though I was far from done. Something wasn't right, and I couldn't let it go. That night, as I drove home in the rain, I called James again. It went straight to voicemail. I checked the tracking app we'd installed years ago. It showed his phone was at the Paramount Hotel downtown. Working late, indeed. I should have felt angry or hurt, but instead, I felt strangely numb. My thoughts were still on the fake shipments and those suspicious wire transfers. I needed to focus on that, not on my broken marriage. When I got home, the house was dark. I went straight to my home office and spread the files across my desk. The more I looked, the clearer the patterns became. The shipping records, the wire transfers, they all pointed to a company called Global Solutions Trading. But the problem was, this company didn't seem to exist. My phone buzzed. It was a text from James. "Working late. Don't wait up." He'd attached a picture of takeout containers on his office desk, trying to prove he was busy. But in the corner of the photo, I noticed Emma's designer purse sitting on his couch. I almost laughed. He thought he was being so smart, so careful. Just like these financial records in front of me, designed to look believable, but full of lies. The next morning, I got to the office early. I needed to dig deeper, so I decided to check the old paper records from before the company went digital. These files were kept in the basement, dusty and forgotten. But I had a feeling they might hold the answers I was looking for. I was buried in old ledgers when I heard footsteps. Robert Montgomery, the CEO, appeared, looking out of place in his fancy suit among the dusty shelves. "Diana," he said, forcing a smile. "Quite dedicated, aren't we? The current audit is on your desk, isn't it?" "Just being thorough," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "There are some discrepancies in the international shipping division. Nothing major, I'm sure." His smile tightened, and I noticed something unusual. His hands were trembling. Robert Montgomery, always confident and composed, looked nervous. That's when I realized I was onto something big. This wasn't just about my husband's affair or my failing marriage. It was something much bigger, something that could shake Montgomery Industries to its core. I just needed to prove it. That evening, I decided to follow James. His late meetings had become predictable. From my car, I watched as he and Emma walked into the Paramount Hotel, his hand resting on her lower back. They looked comfortable, practiced. This wasn't their first time. But I wasn't there for them. I was watching someone else. Harold Chen, the CEO of Pacific Gate Shipping. His company handled the suspicious shipments I'd been investigating. The patterns in the records traced back 5 years to when Pacific Gate first got our shipping contract. That's when the shipments and wire transfers began. As I was piecing everything together, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Michael, my assistant. He had found something in the archived payroll records. Every quarter since the Pacific Gate contract started, 6 consulting fees were sent to offshore accounts. The payments were carefully structured to avoid raising any red flags. I was about to dig deeper when a knock on my car window startled me. It was James, and he looked furious. "Are you following me?" he demanded. I rolled down the window, staying calm. "Actually, I'm working," I replied. "But it's interesting that you assumed I was here for you." James' expression shifted from anger to confusion. "Working here?" he asked. "Harold Chen is staying here," I replied, watching his reaction closely. "You know him, right? Head of Pacific Gate Shipping." The color drained from James's face. "Diana, whatever you think you found." "What I've found," I cut him off, "is a pattern of suspicious shipments and wire transfers going back 5 years. What I don't know yet is how deep it goes or who else is involved." He looked around nervously. "You need to drop this. You have no idea what you're getting into." "Like you dropped our marriage for Emma?" I shot back, bitterness creeping into my voice. "This isn't about Emma," he hissed. "This is about your obsession with those damn files. You're going to get yourself hurt." Was that a threat or a warning? Before I could ask, Emma appeared behind him, her face red with embarrassment. "James," she said softly, "everything okay?" He straightened up quickly, trying to compose himself. "Fine, just dealing with something." I started my car, but James grabbed the door. "Diana, please. Let this go for your own good." I met his gaze. "You know what's interesting about numbers, James? They don't lie. People do." As I drove away, I saw him in the rearview mirror. He was already on his phone, probably warning someone about our conversation. Back home, I encrypted all the evidence I gathered and sent copies to secure servers. James' reaction had confirmed it. This wasn't just about accounting errors, it was bigger. And it was dangerous. The next morning, I walked into my office to find Robert Montgomery waiting for me. His usual confidence was back. "Diana," he said, "I'm afraid we have to let you go." I had expected this. On what grounds? Unauthorized access to confidential records, harassment of business partners. He slid a document across my desk. "Sign." The NDA sat in front of me, Montgomery's cold smile pressing me for an answer. "If I don't sign?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. His smile turned icy. "Then things become unpleasant for everyone involved." I thought of James's warning, those phantom shipments, and Harold Chen at the Paramount. "I'll need time to review this with my lawyer," I said, handing the paper back. 24 hours, Montgomery replied. "After that, the offer expires." Security escorted me out. As I passed Emma's desk, she avoided my gaze. James stood in his office doorway, his face unreadable as he watched me leave. They thought they'd won, that I'd take the money and disappear. What they didn't know was that everything had already been set in motion. The next morning, at exactly 9:00 a.m., I walked into the FBI field office. Agent Sarah Martinez was waiting for me, surrounded by the evidence I'd been quietly sending her for weeks. "The shipping containers," she said without preamble. "They're not empty, are they?" I shook my head. "Based on the weight discrepancies and routing patterns, they're being used to smuggle something. Something valuable enough to justify billions in fake transactions." The investigation moved fast. My detailed financial records laid the foundation for a massive operation. By noon, search warrants were being executed at Montgomery Industries, Pacific Gate Shipping, and a dozen other locations. Harold Chen was arrested at the airport, trying to flee to Hong Kong on a private jet. Robert Montgomery was led out of his office in handcuffs, his flawless facade finally shattering. Then James called. His voice was frantic. "What have you done?" "Me?" I replied calmly. "I just followed the numbers. They led straight to a $4 billion smuggling operation. Interesting how you never notice, considering you signed off on half those shipping manifests." There was a long, deafening silence on the other end of the line. "They'll kill me," James finally whispered. "The FBI can protect you if you cooperate," I said. "Tell them everything you know." And he did. James turned out to be a mid-level player, helping falsify documents and coordinate shipments without fully understanding the magnitude of the operation. His affair with Emma, orchestrated. She wasn't just his mistress, she was Robert Montgomery's niece, planted to monitor potential whistleblowers. The investigation uncovered a sprawling criminal enterprise. Montgomery Industries had been using its legitimate shipping business as a front for smuggling illegal goods across international borders. The careful financial manipulation, fake wire transfers, and phantom shipments had hidden billions in profits from illicit trade. When the dust settled, Robert Montgomery and Harold Chen were sentenced to decades in federal prison. As for James, he avoided prison time by cooperating, but his reputation was ruined. I filed for divorce soon after, starting a new chapter free of lies and betrayal. Standing on the steps of the courthouse, I finally felt at peace. Numbers don't lie. They just need someone brave enough to follow them. James accepted a plea deal in exchange for his testimony. Emma disappeared, presumably back to whatever hole Montgomery had plucked her from. I testified before a grand jury, laying out the complex web of financial fraud that had hidden the smuggling operation. My detailed records and methodical investigation became the cornerstone of the entire case. The media called it the biggest corporate smuggling bust in decades. Montgomery Industries stock plummeted, then rebounded when new leadership took over. I was offered my job back, along with a promotion to chief financial officer. I declined. Instead, I started my own forensic accounting firm, specializing in uncovering complex financial fraud. My first client, the FBI. A year later, James wrote to me from prison. "I'm sorry," he said, "for everything. You were right about the numbers. They don't lie, people do." I didn't respond. Some lies don't deserve forgiveness. Today, my firm is the go-to consultant for companies seeking to protect themselves from financial fraud. I teach at universities, sharing the lessons I learned from the Montgomery case. Students are always fascinated by how a seemingly minor accounting discrepancy led to the uncovering of a billion-dollar criminal enterprise. Pay attention to the details, I tell them. Numbers tell stories, you just have to know how to read them. Sometimes I think about James, about the life we had before it all unraveled, about how his betrayal led me to uncover something far greater than our failed marriage, about how his attempt to hide his affair pushed me to look closer at the numbers that didn't add up. In the end, it wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about justice. It was about truth, the kind that lives in spreadsheets and ledgers, in wire transfers and shipping manifests. The kind that can't be hidden, no matter how clever the lies surrounding it. Because that's the thing about numbers, they always tell the truth, even when everyone else is lying.